Okay, good morning, everyone. Sawadee Kap. Nice to see all of you guys. Sawadee Kap. Welcome back. Today's our last day of our class where I'm going to be helping you understand the 5 hindrances. We're going to be discussing what is enlightened, or not what is enlightenment, but how to determine whether you are enlightened or not. And then I'll talk about integrating the teachings into your day-to-day life and how to get continued support on your journey to enlightenment. We're probably going to be able to do all of that before lunchtime and probably finish up before lunch. So if you guys would like to, we can even go out and do a group lunch if you guys would like to hang out and do some things like that. Or you're more than welcome to coordinate something like that. We can all go somewhere and have lunch and chat if you like. It's up to you guys, but we'll probably be finished before lunch today. The way we're going to start off is with this meditation that I taught you guys yesterday afternoon, the meditation to realize non-self. So remember, we're going to chant on the way in. I'm not going to give any guidance on the breathing mindfulness meditation because you guys should be doing that on your own by now. Then I'm going to come in eventually with these affirmations of I am not the body, I am not the mind, there is no self, I do not exist. I am not the body, I am not the mind, there is no self, I do not exist. So you guys are going to hear those. You just repeat it on the out breath. Then we're going to go back to the breathing mindfulness meditation, and then we're going to come out with the chanting. And then that's where I'll share with you guys the 5 hindrances to your enlightenment, the things that are going to obstruct you from actually attaining enlightenment. So if you'd like to join, you're more than welcome to join in on the chanting. And then after that, we'll go ahead and go right into the meditation. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakava Bhutang Mahakavanang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusarang Oto Bhagavati. Continuing to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. Repeat these affirmations in the mind on the out breath. I am not the body. I am not the body. I am not the body. I am not the mind. I am not the mind. I am not the mind. There is no self. There is no self. There is no self. I do not exist. I do not exist. I do not exist. I am not the body. I am not the mind. There is no self. I do not exist. I am not the body. I am not the mind. There is no self. I do not exist. I am not the body. I am not the mind. There is no self. I do not exist. Now go back to breathing mindfulness meditation, focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. Breathing in and out. สัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาเขวาโหตังมหาเขวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาเขวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเขวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหาเขวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามานุสนังโพโตภาควาติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly ease your way out of meditation. Once again, good morning to all of you guys. Sawadee Kap. Nice to see all of you guys. Welcome to everyone online as well. Today's class, I'm going to be sharing with you the 5 hindrances, removing obstructions to your enlightenment. But before we move into that, I would like to just see if you guys have any questions on the meditation that we did yesterday and today, this meditation to realize non-self, because from this point forward, we're not going to be doing that meditation anymore as part of the class. And I'd like to just see if you guys have any questions or anything you'd like to ask related to this meditation or any of the other meditations too. You can ask anything you like. So it looks like we have some questions coming in. And for those of you guys that are online, you guys can ask questions by putting that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or in Zoom, you can raise your hand electronically and ask any questions that you like.
So with this morning's meditation, I think yesterday I watched the video of it. And you say that it's for like when you're further along the path, maybe at the jhanas. Because I think now your mind's not quite pliable enough. But I actually find it quite liberating that I'm not the mind and I'm not the body.
Good.
So can I mean, that's very good, because my mind's a mess. So can I do it now? I mean, I've been meditating already since about 6 months, so I'm not completely new. I'm new to your teachings.
Yeah, you can do whatever you like at any point in time. You don't need me to approve for you what you can and can't do. This is where each individual student, each practitioner is their own independent practitioner. A teacher is guiding you and helping you to be able to see what it is you need to learn and practice in order to get to enlightenment. But you need to be your own best advisor in order to be able to see what is being impactful to your mind and what is helpful at any given time. Because I can't know 100% of exactly what's going on in your mind at any given time. So that's where if you're finding benefit in this meditation and it's helping you and you can see improvement, yeah, go for it. My guidance was that for the most part, the mind needs to be a little bit further along. And I don't know, with you having done meditation for 6 months, maybe that's, enough for you, in that now this is being helpful for you. But in terms of the mind really being able to let go of personal existence view, it usually happens when someone's in the jhanas, but that's not always the case. Because of impermanence, it can happen different ways for different people. So if this is helpful for you, wonderful, use it. It's still on.
With the...
It's still on, yeah.
With the loving kindness meditation, when obviously you do it personally, you pick certain people that perhaps you really need to show loving kindness to, or develop loving kindness in yourself for them. But what if there's just somebody you can't go there right now?
Yeah, you don't have to put everybody in your meditation right at the beginning. So if you have someone that is really deep anger in your mind, really deep ill will, you might reserve that for another time. This is where, again, you're your own practitioner. For me, I had the most resentment in my mind towards my mom when I started to do these meditations, and I put her in there at the very beginning. But that was me, right? Everybody's going to do it a little bit different. And I also had a lot of negative self-talk within my own mind. So there were times where I would do loving kindness meditation, and instead of doing all those rings for other beings, I would say, may I be peaceful, safe, well, free of discontentness. And then I would do myself again. May I be peaceful, safe, well, free of discontent. Then I do myself again. Then I would do mom 2 or 3 or 4 times. And then I would go to all beings. And that's how the way that I approached it. But everybody's going to do this a bit differently. The techniques are there. The understanding and the wisdom of what you need to do is there, and how you kind of approach it and how you come at it is going to be unique to you. So depending on what's going on in your life right now might not be the time for you to approach that particular individual in your meditation. And if that's what you choose, wonderful. That's you having your mindfulness and awareness of mind and making choices and decisions that are in your own best interest. But the techniques and the wisdom of how to do them and why you would do them, that's all there. And then you apply it as you find best. Yep. Question?
Morning. I just really want to share and ask, because I'm leaving Chiang Mai tomorrow and I still really want to practice this meditation. In today's meditation, I starting to feel like I'm really fighting with my thoughts and trying to really hard to cut it off, to a point I feel like I'm almost out of breath. Is that normal? I almost feel like, I feel that exhaustion, like trying to keep cutting off and trying to get that out of the way. Is that normal to have?
Yeah, that's normal as your mind isn't very well trained and isn't very well disciplined. This is why, like, the idea of going and meditating for 10 or 12 hours a day, it's not actually feasible if you're doing it the way that the Buddha taught it, is that you would like to really target the mind and do things like this where you are in meditation, you are training the mind, you'll see that the mind is challenged with this meditation, and now you work with it skillfully to train it to let go, because that's the whole underlying problem, is that the mind doesn't want to let go. So this internal struggle, this inner war that you are with your mind, I say at the very end of this first book, I say this is the only war worth fighting. All these other wars in the world, they just lead to calamity and difficulties. But this war, it's worth waging this war. Because when you win this war, you're going to win everything. Because if you can win this war, you're going to get the peace and the joy coming to the mind. But it's going to take a long time. So you're not interested in forcing it. But at the same time, you would like to not shrink back from the struggle, where you actively work towards improving this more and more, and just realize that this is part of the process, that the mind's going to try to fight you because it really doesn't want to let go. And this is like an untamed animal that, when the animal trainer comes into the forest, all the animals run, right? Or there's going to be a couple of them that are going to stand their ground and growl and roar at the animal trainer. So that sounds like what your mind's doing.
So it's better do it regularly than do it 1 hour, or it's better you do like twice a day.
You would like to build up to 2 or 3 sessions per day for 30 minutes or more.
30 minutes. Okay.
And it can take a good 6 months, a year, even 2 years to build up to that kind of frequency. But that's what you're going to see the most benefit in. Once you get into those places that do like really long extended meditations, like 10, 12 hours a day, oftentimes people are just sitting there looking at their thoughts, kind of daydreaming, not really paying attention to what's going on. If you're actively training the mind the way that the Buddha teaches, where when there is a thought, you cut it off and let it go. This is like going to the gym, going in there, pumping your weight and getting out.
That's the feeling.
Rather than like walking in, talking to all your friends, hanging out, doing a little bit of exercise, going back and talking to your friends and kind of gallivanting in the gym. And it takes, 3, 4, 5 hours to get your workout done. Instead, get in there, do your 30, 45-minute workout and get out. Right. And that's what you're doing with your meditation, because you have so many more things to do in your day-to-day life. You can't sustain a 10 to 12 hour a day meditation practice. It's just not possible. You're going to need to go out and spend time with your friends and your family, and you're going to need to work and have a professional career and go out and do hobbies and activities and all these things. So just a 30-minute meditation is really all you need, 2 to 3 times per day.
Thank you very much. Thank you, teacher.
You're welcome. Okay, let me see if I have any questions coming in online here. Okay, I'm not seeing questions come in. So we're going to discuss this topic of the 5 hindrances, removing obstructions to your enlightenment. There are certain things that are obstructing you from getting to enlightenment. And you've been learning about some of those things along the way, but here the Buddha has this teaching on the 5 hindrances. And there's actually more hindrances than this, but this is like the top 5 that the Buddha teaches as part of the 5 hindrances. But he has other teachings where he goes into other details about other hindrances. What you're going to see is these hindrances, out of the 5, 4 of them are actually part of the fetters, because those 10 fetters or those 10 pollutions, that's hindering the mind from getting to enlightenment. But he really targets these 5 as a way of, if you're experiencing kind of plateauing in your practice, or you're experiencing the point where you're finding it challenging to move forward in your practice and you just feel like you're not making any progress, he suggests that you look at these 5 that I'm going to share with you here. So to get us started, I'm going to share with you the words of the Buddha here, just as a basic introduction to the 5 hindrances. He talks about the 5 hindrances in other places, but this is just one place where he's kind of introducing the 5 hindrances. He says, monks, there are these 5 hindrances. What 5? The hindrance of sensual desire, the hindrance of ill will, the hindrance of complacency, the hindrance of restlessness and worry, the hindrance of doubt. These are the 5 hindrances. This noble eightfold path is to be developed for direct knowledge or experience of these 5 hindrances, for the full understanding of them, for their complete destruction, for their abandoning. Okay, so here he's just introducing the 5 hindrances and saying, hey, it's the eightfold path that's going to help you eliminate these. That's a core central teaching for everything. Any symptom, any issue, any problematic issue in the mind, it's the eightfold path that's going to guide you to eliminating that. That's a foundational teaching that everybody needs to know if they're planning to get to enlightenment through the teachings of the Buddha. You're going to need to know that inside and out, backwards and forwards, left, right, up, down. And if you haven't studied that yet, there's plenty of ways to do that through our books, our audiobooks, our videos, our podcasts, our classes and courses and retreats. This is taught regularly. So you're going to need to know the Eightfold Path. But there's other places where he talks about the 5 hindrances and he provides other solutions. This is the thing about the teachings of the Buddha. You can't just look at one discourse and understand what it is that he's sharing. You need to look at the totality of his discourses. He doesn't say everything about the 5 hindrances in just this one teaching. There's other teachings that he talks about the 7 factors of enlightenment as being a solution to the 5 hindrances. And then he talks about other things as well. So here I'm just showing you this one particular teaching where he's introducing the 5 hindrances and he's saying, hey, it's the Eightfold Path that's going to help you. And of course, the Eightfold Path path is going to help you with everything. So that's why it's a core central teaching that everybody really needs to develop as a foundation in their path to enlightenment. So now what I'm going to do is just kind of give you an overview of what the 5 hindrances are. Then we're going to go into each one individually. I'm going to explain what they are and give you the solutions to them, so that whenever you're having some challenges on the path, you can potentially look at these 5 hindrances as something that you're going to need to address in order to be able to continue to move forward. Let me just adjust this so it doesn't get too cold. Okay, so the 5 hindrances have similarities to the 10 fetters, as I was just mentioning. Through learning and practicing the Eightfold Path while eliminating the 10 fetters and using the 7 factors of enlightenment will eliminate the 5 hindrances. And I'm going to teach you the 7 factors of enlightenment. These are a tool to fine-tune the mind before I actually teach you the 5 hindrances, because those are solutions. Along with the Eightfold Path, these 7 factors of enlightenment are going to help you to be able to eliminate the 5 hindrances. That term 7 factors of enlightenment, sometimes people think that this is to determine whether you are enlightened or you aren't enlightened, but in reality, it's a tool to be able to fine-tune the mind. You'll see this when I explain it to you. So Gautama Buddha's teachings are oftentimes pointing to each other in either direct or indirect ways. And we see this through the 5 hindrances and the 10 fetters, that there's a connection between these two. It depends on how he's talking about things. He will group his teachings in different groupings depending on what he's talking about. You can see this like with the 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, and the 5 precepts. There's this overlap between all of these teachings. So depending on what he's talking about, he will discuss things in a slightly different way. So when you're talking about what are the pollutions of the mind, what are the things you need to uproot and purify the mind in order to get to enlightenment, that's the 10 fetters. When you're having challenges to look at why is my practice plateauing, what are some obstructions here that I can look at and remove in order to make some forward progress here, that's the 5 hindrances. But these oftentimes have a lot of correlation with each other. So if there's struggles or impediments on the path to enlightenment, it's helpful to look at these 5 hindrances individually and then apply the individual solutions to remove this hindrance. And this is going to create more forward progress on the path to enlightenment. Okay, so here's the 7 factors of enlightenment, because in addition to the Eightfold Path, which I taught on Monday, you're going to need to know the 7 factors of enlightenment in order to really uproot these 5 hindrances out of the mind. So these 7 factors of enlightenment, as I mentioned, are a tool to fine-tune the mind. It's not to determine whether you are enlightened or you aren't enlightened. What you're doing on the path to enlightenment is you're fine-tuning the mind, you're uprooting pollutions out of the mind, and getting to the point where the mind's fully purified. And when you first get started on the path, you might think of it like you're creating a sculpture. You're creating the sculpture of this wonderful human being that's performing perfectly in the world. You're not causing any harm to anybody. That's the ultimate goal. But you're starting out with this big hunk of wood when you're creating a sculpture. And maybe you're creating the sculpture of this perfect human being. Well, when you first get started, you probably get out your axe or your hatchet and you start chucking off a big chunks of wood off of this raw piece of log. And that's like chucking off wrong view and wrong intention, wrong speech, wrong action, wrong livelihood, wrong effort, wrong mindfulness, and wrong concentration. You got to chuck off those big pieces of wood. So that's why you start with the Eightfold Path first and learning that and really refining that. But then after you get this hunk of wood down to a certain point, that's where you're going to come in with a fine-tooth tool, maybe like a razor blade or something like that, in order to carve in the wrinkles of the skin or the eyelashes or something like this. And that's what the 7 factors of enlightenment are. They're to come in and kind of tweak the mind and help you to fine-tune the mind as your mind is starting to swing and starting to experience various symptoms that you're going to see in the 5 hindrances and other parts of your practice as well. So first, this first factor of enlightenment, or this first tool that you're using to fine-tune the mind, is mindfulness. This is the same mindfulness that's in the Eightfold Path as right mindfulness, where you're developing awareness of mind, but more specifically, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, where you're aware of the bodily sensations associated with the discontentedness that's arising. You're aware of the feelings, like pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant, that you're aware of the condition of the mind, like is the mind generally grumpy or agitated or irritated for a few minutes, a few hours, a few days, or a week or two. And then you need to have awareness of the mental objects. The mental objects are the 10 fetters. Those are deeply rooted containers in the mind that are polluting the mind, and you need to be aware of those symptoms that they produce. So that's your mindfulness, that you're aware of general awareness of the mind. That's the way you might think about mindfulness. But more specifically, the 4 foundations of mindfulness are being aware of the bodily sensations associated with discontentedness arising. This might be like tingling in the body, tightening in the chest, tightening in the throat, heat in the face, pressure in the skull. This is like an early warning system alerting you that, hey, you're about to get angry, or hey, you're about to get frustrated, or you're about to feel bored or lonely. There are certain bodily sensations with each one of these conditioned feelings. And what you'd ultimately like to do is cut off and let go of the discontentedness before it actually becomes a feeling. Because if you miss it as a bodily sensation, it's going to become a feeling. And if you miss it and it does become a conditioned feeling, then cut it off and let it go there. Because if you don't, it's going to affect the condition of the mind. Now, for several minutes, several hours, several days, you're going to feel grumpy or irritable or agitated or whatever it is, and you would like to get rid of that. You're not interested in the mind dwelling in that. It's going to stay wired that way. And then ultimately, you like to have awareness of the mental objects, that when you see those symptoms arising, you take action to address them and eliminate them out of the mind. So this is the mindfulness, is having general awareness of the mind in these 4 foundations of mindfulness. Because what you're going to notice is that in some situations, your mind is going to be sluggish. It's going to be dull. It's going to be lethargic. And when you see that condition in the mind, then you bring in these first, or the second, third, and fourth factors of enlightenment. This is what's going to bring your mind out of the sluggish condition, out of that dull and lethargic condition. That the mind is basically pushing things away, and it doesn't want to do things. It's sluggish, it's dull. So the opposite of that is to practice investigation and examination of the teachings, because the mind's going to want to push away the books, push away going to the temple. It's not going to want to meditate because it's sluggish, it's dull, it's lethargic, and you would like to do just the opposite. Apply the right effort to bring in this examination and study of the teachings. Because there, when you start studying the teachings and you start to investigate them through the books and videos and podcasts and coming to classes and talking to your teacher and things like this, then you're going to notice this energy starting to arise in the mind. This effort, determination, ambition, initiative, motivation, enthusiasm, and vigor, this willingness to do something, that's going to start springing up in the mind from your effort to investigate the teachings. Then, as this energy is springing up in the mind, you're going to notice the joy starting to come into the mind. The unconditioned gladness is going to start to come into the mind. So you will have lifted your mind out of that sluggish, dull, lethargic state through applying right effort, starting with the enlightenment factor of investigation. That's going to spring up energy in your mind, and then that's going to lead to joy. And now the mind is going to be in the middle. But then there's going to be some situations where the mind is excited and overactive. And now you need to calm it down in order to bring it into the middle. And that's where you bring in tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. What tranquility is where the mind is relaxed, steady, stable, peaceful, and stillness of mind. You're going to need to apply the effort to bring this in. You need your mindfulness first to be able to notice, the mind is excited, it's overactive, it's bouncing off the walls. Let me bring in the calmness and composure. Let me bring in this relaxed, steady, stable state. And then this is going to arise concentration, where you can have focus. Your mind can be alert and attentive. You can give your attention to a single thought or a single idea. You can practice singleness of mind. Then when that's occurring, then you're going to notice the equanimity coming in, where there's this calmness and composure, evenness of temper, especially in difficult situations. So that's what's going to bring the mind out of that excited state down into the calm state. Now, depending on where you've grown up and how you've grown up, you might think that this excited state is what you're going after. But if you've ever been so excited you like tripped and fell, or you dropped and broke something, you can see that your mind was shaken up in that situation, and it's not ideal. Because when your mind's experiencing those conditioned feelings and it's in that excited, overactive state, the mind isn't able to perform optimally, and you're going to make unwise decisions. So you'd like to bring the mind to the middle and keep it there more and more and more. Because if you can keep bringing the mind to the middle, eventually it's going to stay there. It's that analogy I use with the piece of wood and the steel rod, that if you grind this back and forth, at the beginning it's going to bounce around a lot. But if you grind the steel rod on the wood long enough, eventually it's going to get a groove in the wood. And when it pops out, you're going to know it. You're going to be able to bring it right back to the groove. But if you grind that steel rod back and forth on the wood for long enough, you'll get a deeper and deeper groove. And eventually it will never pop out because it's just going to stay in that groove. And that's what you would like to do with your mind, is don't allow it to dwell in this sluggishness and have the mind wired that way. And don't allow the mind to dwell in this excitement and this overactivity and keep it wired that way. You would like to break that up and bring the mind to the middle so that more and more it'll stay in this middle. And eventually you'll get to the point where the mind doesn't move and it doesn't shift like that, because you've got a really nice groove here that the mind's been staying in the middle for longer and longer periods of time. So it's the 7 factors of enlightenment that are going to help you do that. Because as you're eliminating your cravings, desires, attachments with the breathing mindfulness meditation and the generosity and those other teachings I taught you with like eliminating fears and things like that, by putting the mind in the situation that it doesn't want to be in, sometimes when those cravings are eliminated from the mind, it almost like sends the mind in a little bit of a whirlwind. It's kind of like that toy that they have the spring snakes in the jar, and you pop open the top and the snakes comes spewing out of the can. That's kind of like what it's like when your mind is eliminating some of these attachments. You can find yourself in a situation where your mind's working to eliminate an attachment, and when it finally lifts out of the mind, it can kind of leave you a little bit whirly in the mind. You can actually feel some of these attachments literally when they release. You might even have difficulty sleeping from time to time when these cravings are starting to be eliminated out of the mind. So using the Eightfold Path and breathing mindfulness meditation, generosity, and all these other things that I teach you, as you notice that the mind's sluggish or overactive, you can bring in the appropriate factor of enlightenments to be able to help you. So you're always like to be practicing mindfulness, having awareness of mind from the moment that you're first starting to wake up in the morning, all day long, and as you're going to sleep at night. You would like to have attentiveness of the mind and awareness of what's going on in the mind. At any point you see sluggishness, bring in investigation, energy, and joy. And then when you see overactivity, bring in the tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. So any questions here on the 7 factors of enlightenment? Okay. All right. So now I'm going to move into the 5 hindrances, helping you guys understand what these are and then how to actually remedy them and how to eliminate them. So the first one is sensual desire. Sensual desire is from the 10 fetters. As I mentioned, 4 of these out of the 5 are from the 10 fetters. We talked about sensual desire in this course already, but just for some of you guys that maybe weren't here, I'll just kind of give you a recap and let me know what questions you guys have about this. What sensual desire is where the mind has a longing, yearning through the sense spaces, through the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, and then the mind itself. The mind is longing, yearning. It's wanting permanently agreeable contact. And when you get agreeable contact, you get pleasant feelings. But then when you have disagreeable contact through these sense spaces, you experience the painful feelings and the neither painful nor pleasant feelings. So for example, if you're sitting at a stoplight and you hear music in the car next to you, and it's the music that you like and that you have a craving and desire for, you're going to be like, all right, yeah, that's my jam, party, let's go, come on, let's have a good time. You might be dancing in your seat, bopping around, getting all excited. And that's because you're now hearing a sound through the ears that is agreeable to you. Based on your cravings, your desires, your attachments, that sound is agreeable to you. But now you pull up to the next traffic light and somebody else comes up next to you with music that you don't like. You find this to be repulsive because you have a craving in your mind for this particular type of music. And now when you hear this other music, you're angry and you're frustrated and you're agitated or annoyed. This is because of the mind's craving, desire, attachment. It's the central desire. It's the mind longing, yearning through the senses, wanting permanently agreeable contact. It's not the person playing the music that's causing the frustration and the annoyment. It's not the music itself. It's the fact that the mind has central desire. It's longing, yearning, it's craving for permanently agreeable contact. But yet you live in an impermanent world. You can't have permanently agreeable sounds coming through the ears. And it's the same thing with all these other sense bases. You could be walking down the street and you could walk past a flower shop and smell an odor and be like, oh, wow, that is so wonderful. I wonder what kind of flowers they're selling in there. Wow, that's outstanding. You walk a few more steps and you smell the sewer. You're repulsed by it. Right? Because this is disagreeable to the mind because you have that craving for permanently agreeable contact. Where what you can get to is where you can uproot this central desire out of the mind and you can realize that these are all just impermanent situations. When you smell the smell coming from the flower shop, wow, that smells really nice. Wow, that's a really nice smell. But you don't cling to it and you don't welcome it into your mind in order to form the pleasant feelings, the conditioned pleasant feelings. You enjoy it. You know that it smells good, but you don't get the conditioned pleasant feelings. You don't get so excited about it. And now when you walk a couple more steps and you smell the sewer, it's like, whoa, that's a pretty strong smell. And you just keep walking because you know it's impermanent and it's going to be gone in a few seconds. And there's no need to get angry or irritable or frustrated about it because it's just an impermanent situation. Same thing with the music. You're in the car, someone pulls up to you with nice music that you typically listen to. Wow, that's really good music. Wow, you might even dance a little bit. You might enjoy that, but you don't welcome it in order to get conditioned pleasant feelings. So that now when you get to the next traffic light and somebody has a different type of music on, it's like, hey, that's not the music that you usually listen to, but hey, they're having a good time. Wonderful. It's an impermanent situation. No need to get frustrated or irritated or annoyed because it's only going to last 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and they're going to be gone. Right? It doesn't make sense to sit there and get frustrated and angry and irritable just because there's this impermanent situation that's occurring, right? So this central desire is happening through all of these sense bases: the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and the mind itself. Let's talk about the mind itself because sometimes people have challenges to understand this. The first 5 are pretty self-evident for you guys, but the mind itself is a sense base the way that the Buddha describes it. You can be in the present moment thinking about something in the past, and now you're forming feelings now based on something that occurred in the past. This is the sense base of the mind because the mind is craving permanently agreeable contact, permanently agreeable thoughts. And the mind has experienced something in the past, maybe when you're 3 years old, 5 years old, 10 years old, 20 years old, what have you. And that was a disagreeable experience for you. You got angry in that situation. You didn't want that thing to occur. And now in the present moment, you're experiencing conditioned painful feelings as a result. You can also experience pleasant feelings. You could be thinking about something in the past that happened that was very pleasurable. And now in the present moment, just because of your thoughts, there hasn't been any contact through the eyes, ears, nose, the tongue, the body, just your thoughts thinking about something pleasurable in the past. Now you have conditioned pleasant feelings. And if you allow your mind to experience that, when you have this other thought that wasn't so pleasurable, you'll experience the painful feelings. And then the same thing can happen in the future, right? So this one in the past, we sometimes call this trauma, but all that is the mind's just holding on to some experience and it's forming feelings now based on the past, where you can train your mind to let this go and no longer form feelings based on the past. This trauma doesn't have to be with you for the rest of your life. You can train your mind to not base its feelings on those things in the past. And then the mind can do the same thing in the future. right? You could be in the present moment thinking about your trip to Thailand that's 6 months from now. You could be in your office at work or driving home in your car, and now you're thinking about going to Thailand, or you've already made your plans, and you're leaving in 6 months, and you get so excited because you just can't wait to go to Thailand. You just can't wait to get out the door, right? That's the thought. It's no contact through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, or body. It's just a thought that now you're forming a conditioned, pleasant feeling, getting so excited, right? But now maybe you're having another thought that is more painful. Maybe you become fearful or have anxiety or stress that you're not going to be able to go to Thailand, right? So the mind can have certain thoughts that cause it discontentedness based on its cravings, desires, attachments in the mind. So that's what the sixth sense base is the mind. So the way you remedy this is you eliminate craving, desire, attachment. As long as the mind has cravings, desires, longing, yearning, chasing after the objects of its affection, wants, and expectations, as long as it's craving permanence, it's going to keep experiencing these conditioned feelings. It's going to go up and down, up and down, up and down. So you need to be able to eliminate the central desire in the mind. So it's the breathing mindfulness meditation that's going to help you eliminate this central desire, and it's the practice of generosity that's going to help you to train your mind to let go. These are the two things that are targeting it. But remember, you need the Eightfold Path. Without the Eightfold Path, you wouldn't be able to just do breathing mindfulness meditation and practice generosity to eliminate your cravings. You need all those other factors as well. But these are the two things that are targeting it. And then the Buddha talks about guarding the mind. You need to be guarding the mind with your mindfulness, or guarding the doorways to discontentedness. The doorways are the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind. Anytime you've ever experienced discontentedness, it's from some contact through the six sense bases. Not only can you narrow down exactly what your craving, desire, attachment is, but you can actually narrow down what sense base did it receive contact, and then that's where it became discontent. I'll give you an example. One time I was walking down the street, and I had been working on getting rid of coffee, right? And as I was walking down the street, and I thought like, hey, I got rid of coffee. It's been 8 weeks since I had a coffee. Wow, look at me. In my mind, I was thinking this way. Wow, look at me. I'm so great. I'm getting rid of these attachments. I'm going to get to enlightenment. Aren't I so great? And I walk down the street, and I get this whiff of the coffee. And I go right into the coffee shop. I'm standing in line. I'm like, what am I doing? This is going to be painful. That caffeine is going to make my mind overactive. I'm going to have a headache. Why am I doing this to myself? And I was standing there in line telling myself all these things. And then I got up to the front of the line, and I ordered my coffee. Right? And I sat down and I started drinking my coffee. And then about a third of the way through the cup, I was like, why am I doing this to myself? This is silly. And I threw it away. And then I never had another coffee again. Right? And then later, I started looking at this. I was like, what happened? Why did this occur? Well, I wasn't guarding my doorways to discontentedness. I had that odor come into the nose, and that craving was in there for coffee, and it pulled me into the coffee shop. So now, having identified, hey, you still have a craving to coffee, and it came through the nose, now I started making different decisions to experience different results. That now, for the next 3 months or so, I started to become very vigilant about coffee shops. When I would walk down the street, I would kind of look at the stores and look at the vendors ahead of me. And if I saw a coffee shop on the right, I would switch over to the other side of the street. And I would go over to the left, and I would walk up that side of the street, so I wouldn't get the whiff of the coffee. And I did this for several months until I was confident that the craving had been eliminated. And then I started just walking my normal way of wherever I was going. And now I'm at the point where sometimes students, they invite me to coffee shops because they would like to get a coffee, but they would like to talk, and they like to have a conversation about the teachings and getting help. So I sometimes go to coffee shops, and I sit there and order my water, or I order my smoothie, or whatever else it is that I'm going to order, and I can smell coffee all day long, and there's no craving whatsoever to actually have it. So I can go into these places. But at that time, when my mind was a bit sensitive and I still had the craving in my mind, I had to guard my doorways. I had to guard the nose, that when I walked past a coffee shop, the mind was too sensitive that if I took in that odor, it would pull me into the coffee shop. So these are the kinds of things that you can do when you understand what's going on. When you have the wisdom to understand what central desire is, you can start making different decisions, right? So if you know that there's a particular event at a friend's house and there's 3 or 4 or 5 friends that are getting together, and you know you have a bunch of ill will towards this one particular person, and you're really working on eliminating this ill will, and you know if you see them, it's going to, arise your craving, or if you hear their voice, it's going to arise your craving and your ill will is going to come out, and then you're going to be unskillful. You can guard your doorways and just decide not to go. And maybe you just don't go to that event on that particular day because you're still working on your mind and you know that this isn't wise for you to go into this situation. These are the kind of decisions that you can make, right? So this contact through the sense bases, if you have craving, desire, attachment, if you have central desire in your mind, you're going to see it as agreeable or disagreeable. And then you're going to get pleasant feelings or painful feelings. But when you get rid of this central desire, when you get rid of all these cravings, the contact is neither agreeable nor disagreeable anymore. It's just contact. So right now you might have certain foods that you like and certain foods that you dislike and that you're repulsed by, right? And if you eat this food, you get really happy. And if you get this food, maybe you get frustrated or agitated. You would like to get to the point where that's not the case, that you just see it as something to nourish the body, that it's not to, this food isn't to please the mind. That's not what food's for. Food is to be able to sustain the body. So if you're eating based on emotions, that you eat this food because you get pleasant feelings and you avoid this food because you despise it, you're going to need to get to the point where you're able to eat any and all foods and be completely content and joyful regardless. And this is going to happen through practicing breathing mindfulness, meditation, and generosity, guarding your doorways, and actually in some cases even putting your mind in the situation that it's repulsed by. So in situations where you have a craving and you're attached to something and you get pleasant feelings as a result of it, you're going to need to distance yourself from that for an extended period of time and train your mind to let it go. And in some cases you can actually start having that thing again with coffee or something like that. You're not going to maybe do that, but something like chocolate cake or something like this, you might decide to actually start eating that again once you've distanced yourself for a period of time and trained your mind to let go of the craving, desire, attachment. In other situations, you're repulsed by something. You're pushing these things away and you despise them and you don't want to have that durian fruit in your mouth or whatever it is for you, right? In those situations, you're going to need to put your mind in that situation in order to train your mind to not be repulsed by this. So the things that the mind is attracted to, you're going to need to distance yourself for a period of time, train your mind to let it go. And in some situations, you might actually end up going back to be able to use that thing because there's no harm in using it. It's just that your mind was attached to it. You need to let it go first. Make sure your mind has let it go. Then you might start using that thing again. But there's these things that you're repulsed by that you're going to need to put your mind in that situation to train it to let go. So I'll give you an example of this. Let's just say you are repulsed by large crowds. You don't like being around large crowds at all. You'd much rather be alone by yourself. Well, in this situation, just avoiding large crowds isn't going to solve your problem because your mind has a craving to be alone. And now if you're avoiding large crowds, it's not going to solve your problem because your mind still has the craving. You might be in a city someday like New York City, walking down the street, you turn the corner and boom, you find yourself in a large crowd. This is very possible in some cities, right? And now you're all uncomfortable, you're all shaken up, you're fearful, having stress and anxiety. You haven't eliminated the root cause, which is the craving, desire, attachment. So what you would like to do, since the mind is repulsed by these large crowds, is put your mind in that situation, is go around some large crowds and train your mind to be peaceful and comfortable and joyful in those situations. But this other situation that maybe you're attracted to, let's just say maybe you really, really like chocolate cake, and you notice that when you go to the store and they have your chocolate cake, you get so excited, but now when they don't have your chocolate cake, you get angry and frustrated. In this situation, you're going to need to distance yourself from that. You're going to probably need to go away from chocolate cake for 3 months, maybe 6 months or so, and train your mind to let it go. And then as you realize that you've potentially let this go, you might start having chocolate cake again, because there's nothing harmful with chocolate cake. But now you have one piece of it, and then you might wait a week or 2 or 3 to have another piece. And then you have another piece, and then you might wait another week or 2 before you have another piece. And you kind of slowly start introducing the mind back to this chocolate cake, where it's not clinging to it, where it's not forming its inner feelings based on it, because you went away from it for a period of time. But there's some things that you might not go back to, like coffee or alcohol or drugs or things like this. Okay, so this is the first hindrance. It's called central desire. When your mind's getting what it wants, it's going to get those pleasant feelings. But when it doesn't get what it wants, it's going to get the painful feelings. And one of the things that can occur when those painful feelings are coming in is the mind's ill will can arise. This is the anger, the hatred, the ill will, the bitterness, the hostility. This is where you might push people away, or you push the situation away, thinking that that's going to solve the problem. Or you might be bitter, harsh, and hostile through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. And this is like damaging your relationships, because now you're being unskillful in your relationships. Or you might put your expectations on people and try to control them, because this ill will is arising and it doesn't feel comfortable within your own mind. The mind misunderstands what the real problem is, so it'll push people away, push the situation away, be bitter, harsh, and hostile through your intentions, speech, and actions. And now your relationships get damaged. Or you might put your expectations on people. So when you notice this ill will arising, you know that this is unskillful, and you'd like to purify the mind of that. And what you would like to do is practice loving kindness meditation, which is something that we did in this course. That's going to be the regular, consistent, ongoing training to rewire the mind. And you'd like to be doing that in the mornings. That's a really good time to do that. But that doesn't mean that you can't do it in the afternoon or the evenings as well. But you'd like to be doing your loving kindness meditation. And then you'd like to be practicing loving kindness in your day-to-day life through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. So it's one thing to meditate, but it's another thing to go be loving and kind with mom and dad. It's one thing to meditate and then go be loving and kind with your brothers and your sisters and your life partners and the people like this. You would like to practice being loving and kind in your day-to-day life. That's where the real transformation's happening. The meditation is just kind of filling up the mind with loving kindness so that you can go out into the world and actually practice being loving and kind on a day-to-day basis. And this is where when you transform your mind and you transform the way that you interact with people, you're going to see a transformation in your relationships. But as long as you hold on to the bitterness and hostility and you keep putting that out in your relationships, it's going to keep coming back to you. So you need to be able to extinguish this through extinguishing it within your own mind. You need to uproot the ill will. But as long as your mind holds on to the ill will, you're going to be hindered or obstructed from getting to enlightenment, just like the central desire. As long as you're holding on to your central desires and being unwilling to let them go, then your mind's going to be hindered and obstructed from getting to enlightenment. Then there's complacency. What complacency is dullness, lethargy, a lack of motivation. And some of the old translations that you might see of the teachings of the Buddha from Pali to English, they use this phrase sloth and torpor. You might see that in some of the very old translations. This is where the mind is dull, it's lacking motivation, it's lacking enthusiasm, it's lacking ambition and vigor, and you would like to be able to eliminate that. Complacency can be as simple as you just aren't interested in meditating and you don't want to meditate for several days. You're not interested in reading books. You're not interested in coming to the classes. You're not interested in talking to a teacher and getting help. This is complacency, right? Where the mind is unmotivated to actually learn and grow and develop on the path. And that's going to hinder you from getting to enlightenment. But the Buddha, when he describes complacency, he takes it all the way to the level that if you're walking down the street, for example, and an unwholesome thought comes into your mind and you do nothing about it, he says, this is complacency. Because you've allowed that unwholesome thought to be dwelling in the mind. You're allowing the mind to stay wired with that unwholesome thought. So if you're dozing off to sleep at night and you're noticing an unwholesome thought come into your mind and you do nothing about it, this is complacency. You would like to get to the point where you're vigilant and you're watching over the mind, that even there's an unwholesome thought that starts coming into the mind, you cut it off and let it go. That's what you need to be doing. It's a full-time job to train your mind. You need to be watching over the mind at all times. So the complacency, yes, not being interested in meditating, coming to the temple, those kinds of things, you can see that really easily. But even if you have an unwholesome thought, like maybe you're walking down the street and you're judging somebody else and you're looking down on them and thinking that you're better and they're not so good, this is complacency if you do nothing about it. You need to cut that off and let it go and be like, no, I'm not going to let you judge that person, right? It's almost like the mind is one thing, the body's another thing, and then there's this person. This is what the Buddha describes. The person needs to look at the mind and be like, hey, I'm not going to let you judge that person. No, cut that off. I'm not going to let you be angry. No, cut that off. No, I'm not going to let you long and yearn after that thing. Cut that off. Right? Or if there's some other cravings that come into the mind, cut those off. And then that's eradicating complacency. So whenever you notice that the mind's complacent, the enlightenment factors of investigation, energy, and joy is what's going to eradicate that. You would like to arise that in the mind because that's the sluggish and dull and lethargic condition that you're trying to bring the mind out of that and bring it into the middle. And that's what's going to lift it up and bring it to the middle. So let me know what questions you guys have. I see you guys have a few mics out. I'm not sure which order you guys would like to ask your questions, but I'll just turn it over to you guys. For you guys online, you can ask your questions by putting that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. So it looks like, Claire, you're ready.
Yeah. I have a natural training ground for all of this because I walk for an hour or two every day, just getting around town here in Chiang Mai. And the social style of, I'll just say Asians, because there's a lot of Thai people, a lot of Chinese people. It's completely different rules of the sidewalk compared to in the States. And so, I've talked to you about this before, where I found that just so challenging before, because this other style looks aggressive to me based on American style of walking on the sidewalks, like where people would normally in the States see me and alter their path based on where they see me consistently going, both of us kind of adjusting to make sure that we can pass. And here, people see me coming and seem to wait until I'm just about to approach them and then step right in front of me and stop. And so this has been just such a great training for me to get this under control. And it's really working, I go out and I'm armed. I wish you well. Mm-hmm. I wish you well. I wish you well. And so, walking now is really good, and I'm chilling out. And I feel like I am, it's like another tool, like the meditation, of getting me stronger in terms of these laws. And where I've noticed myself kind of falling down in terms of mindfulness in my activities is when the American election happened. I accidentally got into 2 different political conversations. And when people said easily verifiable things that were not true, I just blurted out, a bad word, and wasn't happy with myself. But I don't have an easy way to spend 2 hours a day doing desensitivity training on myself. Mm-hmm. So can you give me a little tip on maybe how to address those higher level challenges that kind of pierce the veil of the senses on a rare, as rare occurrences?
Sure. So what this was sensual desire, right? You wanted to hear certain agreeable things, and when you heard something disagreeable, then your craving arose, and then it became unskillful through your speech, right? So you would like to be consistent with your breathing mindfulness meditation and your generosity, which you surely are, practicing all those kinds of things in your Eightfold Path. You would like to really train that really well. And what you would like to be able to do is these individuals that you know that you've had these conversations with, it's probably a regular topic that they probably talk about, I would imagine. And prior to talking with them that these things are probably going to come up. And when each one of these situations occur, it's an opportunity for you to cultivate wisdom, which you're doing, and getting help to be able to then approach it in a better way in the future. And what you're experiencing when you're feeling, I think you said bad or whatever you said, this is what the Buddha refers to as moral wrongdoing and moral concern. There's this ability to be able to know what's wise and unwise once you start training on the path, so you know that what you did was unwise. And then there's this regret or this concern that, gosh, I shouldn't have done that. That's going to produce unwholesome results. So those qualities are actually really helpful. If you didn't have moral wrongdoing and moral concern, you wouldn't actually be able to get to enlightenment. But you would like to get to the point where you've cultivated enough wisdom that in the future that you can perform in the way that you would like the way you would prefer, but understand that you're a work in progress. So in addition to the breathing mindfulness meditation, the generosity, and understanding the practice of the Eightfold Path, what I would do is, now that you know that you're having this challenge with these particular relationships and these particular conversations, is if you know you're about to call them or you're planning to call this person, is review the 5 factors of well-spoken speech in your mind, like 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Like, these posters are really good for that. And I have it on my phone, and you can kind of look at it. If you'd like to have it on your phone, you can kind of use it as a way to like refresh your memory. And now call this person with the intention of just having a conversation, even if you don't really have anything magnificent to talk about, but you're just practicing in order to get your mind to the point where you're essentially rewiring it, that you can have a conversation with this person without whatever happened. So if you review the 5 factors of well-spoken speech and now call this person with the sole intention of just practicing the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, what you talk about is almost irrelevant. It's just you trying to practice and make sure you can break through this craving where you don't want permanently agreeable things from them to be said. And that whenever they say something that is typically disagreeable to you, just understand that that's their opinion, that's their view, and what you choose to do about it is up to you. You could just ignore it and move on in the conversation. That's one option. There are skillful ways to have conversations when there's something that someone says that you disagree with, but at this point in time, it doesn't make sense for you to do that. It's better for you to first get over your craving before I teach you those kinds of things. So if you call them with the sole intention of just having a 5 factors of well-spoken speech conversation, and whatever you guys talk about is irrelevant, that you're just trying to arise those 5 factors in this conversation, and that's all you're interested in doing, that will help you to break through. And then do that multiple times so that you get more and more stable with these 5 factors of well-spoken speech in these particular relationships. Because like with me and with all the people here, you're always using the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, but you have some amount of craving that's getting triggered in these relationships, and you would like to overcome that. And this is how you do it, is just have some regular conversations where you've boned up on the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. You go into the conversation with that sole purpose. And now when you get done, even if it's a 5 or 10 minute conversation, and then you just get off the phone, you can be like, I did it. Okay. You don't have to feel pride, right? No pride, but just like, okay, I can do this. It's like a little bit of the rewiring of the mind. And now you wait 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 days, and then you do it again. And you just kind of get this stability of being able to talk to this person with the 5 factors every single time, no matter what they're saying. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're welcome. Other questions?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So you use the example of the coffee and the cake. I mean, so is it okay to go for the coffee and the cake, provided that, for example, if you get there and the coffee shop's shut or they don't have your cake, you don't react. You're like, okay, that's fine, right? You don't have to not go for the coffee and the cake, right?
Yeah, if you're noticing that you're not discontent with those kinds of situations, then you know that your mind is not craving it. It's not the cake that is the problem. In the case of coffee, it is an issue because of the caffeine. I would encourage you to move away from the caffeine because it creates an overactive mind. It is a stimulant. It is going to produce heedlessness. So if you get away from your caffeine, you'll notice that the mind will develop a natural energy because you don't need caffeine in order to survive in the world. This is something that people take as a drug and as a substance to be able to lift up their energy. It's not actually required in order to sustain life. But by the time you get to enlightenment, you'll have natural energy where you can have energy all day long, but you'll never be able to do that if you just turn to the caffeine, because you'll get lifted up during the caffeine and then you'll drop back off. So by getting rid of the caffeine, the mind will become more pure, more stable, and you'll have more natural energy. So in the case of something like a chocolate cake, that's not the attachment. That's not the problem. That's not the issue. It's observing the mind to see if it's getting discontent whenever it ingests it or comes in contact with it. So if you get really excited when there's chocolate cake and you get frustrated or agitated or annoyed when there is no chocolate cake, there's a craving there and you would like to distance yourself from that. But if you're not noticing that the restaurant's closed and you're just like, oh, well, and you just go on to the next thing and you're not agitated or frustrated, then there's no attachment there. And maybe you still eat that chocolate cake there, that there's no problem with chocolate cake. Mm-hmm. Other questions? Yep.
So kind of on the coffee thing still, if you, I think like your example too was like coffee sometimes gives you headaches and stuff. If you like, you know that it will affect you in some way and you don't crave it, say like maybe you're in like the coffee capital of the world, right? And you say like, I would like to try this coffee, knowing that there will be negative effects possibly. Is it still okay to try it?
I don't think in terms of is it okay, because this is like me being the person who's determining what is okay and what is not okay. And I'm not interested in putting myself in that situation. That's for each individual to decide for themselves. But what you will find with the natural law of karma, of cause and effect and action and result, that when you ingest caffeine, there's going to be an effect. And that effect, as you train your mind more and more, is going to be more and more substantial. That it's just like a beer. You know, the first time you've probably drank alcohol before, you know, you drink a beer, whoa, you get really drunk off of one or two beers or one or two drinks. But then over time, you build up a tolerance to it and you need 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 drinks to produce the same type of experience. Well, it actually works in the opposite direction too, that when you're purging these things from your life and your mind's becoming more and more pure, you're going to notice that the caffeine has more and more of an effect to the mind, all the way to the point where a couple of years ago, I was in a coffee shop and I ordered a cold cocoa because I didn't realize these things had caffeine in it, and I ordered it and I took a sip and it was like, whoa, that's like really strong. And I looked online and it said that it has 1/8 of the amount of caffeine that a cup of coffee has. And I noticed it just from one sip. And I noticed it and I was like, whoa, I'm not drinking that. Even though I paid 40 or 60 baht for it, I didn't drink it. So your mind's going to become very sensitive the more you train it and the more pure it becomes. And you're not going to like that feeling that the coffee gives you, where now maybe you like it because it's lifting up your energy, or maybe the central desire, maybe the milky taste and the sweet taste or whatever it is, the bitter taste of coffee that you like. But if you get rid of your central desire, where you're not longing, yearning for it through the tongue, you'll see that you don't need this substance of caffeine. Now, I have seen that they have some coffees that they're starting to make out of mushrooms that don't have any caffeine. I haven't had it myself, but in that situation, if you like the taste of coffee, it seems like there's some solutions that are coming out nowadays that don't have caffeine, because they advertise decaffeinated coffee that's made out of coffee beans, but they've done research on this, and sometimes the decaf coffee has more caffeine than the actual caffeinated coffee. So you got to pay attention to that. So that's why, like, going to something like a mushroom-based coffee, you'll know that it doesn't have any caffeine in it, and that might be something you choose to ingest. Because I drink things like turmeric tea and stuff like that every once in a while, or they have lemongrass tea that doesn't have any caffeine in it. So if you like ginger tea, hot teas and stuff like this, there's plenty of other options besides using one with caffeine in it.
That makes sense. And then I had a question on the complacency example you used. In like beginning, if you aren't able to cut off things yet, but you are aware of unwholesome thoughts, isn't that awareness still also important? Like, not being complacent, you're aware that, oh, that was a negative thought, unwholesome thought towards somebody, but you aren't able yet to let it go yet.
Yeah, having awareness that it is an unwholesome thought, that's an improvement in one's practice, because before we might have just been walking down the street, judging everybody, thinking we're so great, not even knowing that this is unwise. But now if you're starting to notice the judgment, for example, and you know that it's unwise, but you're not doing anything about it, it's still complacency. That's why the mind is going to be hindered from getting to enlightenment. It's not until you start taking action on these thoughts that you're actually going to be able to move past where you are and actually continue to journey forward to enlightenment.
So if you say you have an unwholesome thought towards someone and then you notice it, but then in your own mind you then put out a wholesome thought towards that person, is that doing something about it?
Yeah, exactly. Because that's applying right effort, where you're getting rid of the unwholesome and you're arising the wholesome. Okay. And that's what you would like to be doing with all of these things.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, we have a question coming in on YouTube. This person is asking, how do you know which hindrance is troubling me? This is coming from your wisdom, that the more you understand what each individual hindrance is, then you use your mindfulness or awareness of mind to be able to help you discern, is it sensual desire, is it ill will, is it complacency? And then you're going to see two more here in a minute as well. So that's why you need to learn in a class like this to just understand what are the hindrances, so that then with your mindfulness, you can discern this for yourself. You can make wise decisions to figure this out, because you're the one who is your own best doctor, essentially. You're going to know what's going on in your mind at any given time. So you're going to need to be able to observe your own mind and figure this out through your wisdom. That's why getting to enlightenment, it's not just meditation. Sometimes people think you can go somewhere and you can meditate and get to enlightenment. That's not going to produce enlightenment. You need actual wisdom to understand all aspects of the mind and all aspects of the path in order to be able to actively train the mind on a day-to-day basis. The idea of sitting under a tree and meditating and getting to enlightenment, this isn't actually true. In places that think that way, sometimes they're very heavy on meditation. You might see 8, 10, or 12 hours worth of meditation per day, thinking that meditation is all you need. But if you're not learning these kinds of things and cultivating your wisdom, you're not going to have all the tools and techniques that you need to be able to produce enlightenment. Okay, that's the only questions I see so far. Okay, so now let's talk about these next two. Restlessness and worry. What this is this is also from the fetters. If you remember that fetter of restlessness, what this is where the mind's confused, distracted, there's this restless state of mind, or you're having worry of your own unskillful conduct. So if every single time you do something unwise, you get worried about this is going to hinder you from getting to enlightenment. You got to understand that you're a work in progress and that you're just going to gradually make your way to enlightenment. You're going to have missteps. Even when you're in the third stage of enlightenment, you're still going to have some missteps, right? They're not very significant by that point, but you're going to have some missteps, right? So it's not until your mind's actually enlightened that you're going to be practicing these teachings perfectly and effortlessly. On your way to enlightenment, there's going to be a lot of effort. There's going to be a certain amount of struggle and challenge making your way to enlightenment. But by the time you get to enlightenment, it'll be effortless. So if you're having a restless or worry state of mind, you're going to notice the restlessness is this overactivity. That's why getting rid of the caffeine is so important, because the caffeine can produce an overactive mind and a restless state of mind. And now the mind can have worry. Sometimes you might see this in your bodily actions, like if your body's moving around a lot like this, or you're tapping your leg, or you're tapping your finger, or you're bobbing your foot, all these kinds of things, right? This is your mind being overactive and it's coming through in the body. So what you would like to do is be able to notice that and restrain the mind and not allow the mind to be overactive like that, right? So the way that you do that is when you notice the mind is overactive and it has this worry, is you bring in the tranquility, the concentration, and the equanimity. That was from the 7 factors of enlightenment. You need to apply the effort to bring in this calmness and this peacefulness in the mind. And you do that through these enlightenment factors. Okay? Then there's the hindrance of doubt. What doubt is, again, this is from the fetters. This is where you have doubt about the teachings and their ability of them to be able to attain enlightenment. If you have doubt about the teachings, this will hinder you from getting to enlightenment, but it doesn't have to. You can actually use this doubt in order to help you to get to enlightenment, because you can harness this doubt and turn the mind into an inquisitive mind. You can roll up the sleeves and you can be like, you know what? You do doubt the teachings of the Buddha. Maybe you do have doubt right now. That's very common when someone comes to the path to enlightenment. They'll have doubt whether the Buddha actually existed. They'll have doubt in the teachings themselves. They'll have doubt in the community that you're part of. You'll have doubt about your teacher and whether your teacher can actually help you to get to enlightenment. And you'll have doubt about your own ability to get to enlightenment. You might think like, I can't get to enlightenment. Other people can do it, but I can't, right? That might be what you think. Well, if you have this doubt, it's a defeating, sabotaging way to look at the world. It's going to sabotage your ability to get to enlightenment. So when you get rid of your doubt, then you're going to be able to make progress. But as long as you have doubt, it's going to hinder you from getting to enlightenment. So what you do is you harness this doubt. You turn the mind into an inquisitive mind where you investigate the teachings. That's what's going to eliminate your doubt, is investigation and examination of the teachings. You don't eliminate your doubt through blind belief. If you have belief, you don't know what's true or false. You're not cultivating wisdom. You can't eliminate your doubt through belief. Belief is just, hey, I'm just going to believe these things because somebody convinced you to believe it, or you convinced yourself to believe it. But if you examine and investigate the teachings, if you reflect on them to independently verify them, and then you start practicing the teachings, integrating them into your day-to-day life and training your mind, you'll see the improvement to the condition of your mind in your life. And you'll get to the point where you have no doubt that these teachings are leading to an improved life and an improved condition of your mind. And there you'll know that, hey, I have confidence now, more and more. It's going to take time. It's not going to be one day or 1 week that you get rid of this doubt, but over time, you'll be able to gain this confidence where you have confidence in the Buddha, confidence in his teachings, confidence in the community that you're part of, confidence in your teacher, and confidence in your own ability to get to enlightenment because you see it happening. You see that you're making your way towards enlightenment because you're seeing the improvement to the condition of the mind in your life. That's how you get rid of the doubt, is by training the mind through investigation. When you're investigating the teachings, learning, reflecting, and practicing, that's what's going to build this confidence because you see the improvement and you know you're headed in the right direction. So these are the 5 hindrances that the Buddha talks about with the 5 hindrances, but he talks about this other hindrance and others. This particular hindrance is like the hindrance of all hindrances. The hindrance of all hindrances is this ignorance or this unknowing of true reality. That's the biggest obstruction to your enlightenment, is your lack of wisdom of the natural laws of existence. If you don't know how to meditate in the way that the Buddha taught, you're not going to be able to get to enlightenment. If you don't understand generosity and why that's important and practice generosity, if you don't have that wisdom, you're not going to be able to get to enlightenment. If you don't have the wisdom of the 4 Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path and the 5 Precepts, if you don't understand this training, if you have a lack of wisdom, if you have this unknowing of true reality, this misperceptions of how the world functions, then you're not going to be able to get to enlightenment. So that's why the ultimate goal is to cultivate wisdom about these natural laws, and that's what's going to lead to your enlightenment. So as long as there's this ignorance or unknowing of true reality in the mind, it'll hinder you from getting to enlightenment. When we talk about eradicating ignorance by cultivation of wisdom, there is an intellectual part of this where you need to study the books, you need to come to classes, you need to think about the teachings, you need to reflect on them. There is an intellectual part to it. But ignorance isn't fully eradicated until you're actually practicing the teachings. If you're not practicing the teachings, there's still ignorance in the mind. So for example, we can grow up and we can know intellectually that drugs and alcohol are unwise for us. We can know that intellectually. We can even reflect on it, and we can reflect and we can say, yeah, this is really unwise, but we still do it because we still have ignorance. Right? So intellectually, we can understand something, but our cravings and our desires are so strong that we actually can't overcome them because of our ignorance, because of our unknowing of true reality. So it's this practice that is going to fully be able to eradicate the ignorance. There needs to be a certain amount of intellectual learning and reflection, but you need to be able to practice the teachings. And that's where the ignorance is fully eradicated. Okay, so these are the 5 hindrances. I'll give you guys a chance to ask any questions on these that you like. Is there anything you guys would like to ask on number 4 and 5, or even ignorance? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. Okay, so I'd like to be sure you guys understand mindfulness and what that is. I talked about it at the beginning with the 7 factors of enlightenment, but mindfulness is so important with the 5 hindrances. If you don't have awareness of your mind and you don't understand the 4 foundations of mindfulness, you wouldn't be able to observe and notice these 5 hindrances in the mind. So you need to have wisdom of what the 5 hindrances are, but you need to have mindfulness and awareness of mind so that when you see the sensual desire, you know what that is. Or when you see the ill will, you know what that is. When you see the complacency, you know what that is. When you see the restlessness and worry, you know what that is. And when you see the doubt, you know what that is. If you didn't have mindfulness and you didn't know how to practice mindfulness, you wouldn't be able to see any of these 5 hindrances. So you're going to need to be sure that you understand this. So do you guys have any questions on mindfulness? Because I taught this on Monday and I kind of reminded you of it when we were talking about the 7 factors of enlightenment. Are you guys familiar with what this is, or have any questions on what mindfulness is? No? Okay, I don't see any questions online either. Okay, so right now it's 10:45, and depending on what we're doing in the class, we sometimes take a lunch break and then come back and teach you the things afterwards. But based on where we are in the class, it's 10:45. We could actually take like a 15-20 minute break here, and then we could come back and I could teach you the remaining things of the class, probably in about 15 or 20 minutes. And then we would be done and we could actually go to lunch together, or we could just end. Or if you guys would like to help me, there's some projects going on here that's going to be happening over the next few days, that if you guys would like to help with some activities here at the temple, we have some things that you guys could get involved in to kind of help at the temple, which I'll explain those things to you as well. So if you guys would, let's just say we'll take a 20-minute break. We'll get back together at 10 minutes after 11. That'll be essentially a little bit more than a 20-minute break. And then I'm going to start with understanding how to determine if you've attained enlightenment. Then I'm going to teach you how to integrate the teachings into your life. Then I'm going to teach you how to get continued support on your journey to enlightenment. So if you'd like to take a nice 20-minute break, and then we'll pick it up from there. Okay, so thank you guys for your questions and your interest to learn. I'll see you guys in a little bit. Okay.